So, welcome everyone. You can all hear me very well? Okay, great. So, my name is Steve Allen, but I'm going to do a little introduction in a second. We're here for the Youth Peer Mentoring, Building a Peer Mentoring Workforce. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But really, this is about the State VR Peer Mentoring Program, the Youth Peer Mentoring Program that is part of vocational rehab. And so we'll be describing some elements of that, but want to get started, and then we'll do introductions. And because it's a small group, we hope to have some questions and comments and all of that from you as well. So this is sort of a job announcement. VR Community Employment Service Providers seeking peer mentor coordinators and peer mentors. So there's now in the state a job where you can become and get paid to be a peer mentor or a peer mentor coordinator. And serving students and youth with disabilities preparing to transition. So those self-advocacy skills and those transition skills and really being the support for that transition. So today there are peer mentor coordinators being held and trained and also peer mentors. So I give a little job description as an example. So a peer mentor would be someone with self-determination, willing to share their experiences, their knowledge, and resources for self-advocacy engagement with a student or a youth with disabilities. Candidates are self-motivated, they have qualities of leadership, are able to work independently because they would be working with a peer mentee, a young person, a student with a disability to help them through these transitions, and would be a young adult, somewhere between the ages of 18 and 30. So there are these positions in the state system now where there are community rehab providers, organizations in the community throughout the state of Florida who may have peer mentors on staff and a peer mentor coordinator who can offer these services. And so if your VR counselor determines that you are a good candidate for a peer mentor, they can refer you to those activities. And we'll get into more detail about what that is and how that works. But so you sort of get the idea here that this is sort of new, that you can that a person, a young adult with a disability, or a young adult could be trained and certified as a peer mentor and earn money, be employed as a peer mentor, serving those students and youth behind them that meet the criteria. And we'll get into those details. So, it didn't occur to me that this.
Did we not start at the beginning?
No, this is the beginning, but we may need video on internet for that. Do we have a password?
I can pull it up.
Okay, we'll come back to that. So this is, we'll figure out how to get on the internet. This is a young person, as an example, a young person in Florida who it tells the story of 3 peer mentees that she worked with while she was a peer mentor. And the cool thing about it is it was part of her career, and now she is a 6th grade teacher in Brooklyn, New York. But her first job while she was in college was to serve as a peer mentor for one of the providers in Florida. And so it's really cool to hear her tell about her experience with the 3 mentees and how effective and important that was for those mentees. So we'll come back to that. So my name is Stephen Allen. I'm the president of PolicyWorks. PolicyWorks is a national nonprofit from Tallahassee who is working in the peer mentoring space with vocational rehab agencies. And we have developed a training that is part of what gets you certified to be a peer mentor or a peer mentor coordinator, and we provide that to those community providers in your community that have the programs. And so we worked with the Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center. It was basically a national grant to help build out this new peer mentoring service across the country. So we do peer mentoring programs in Florida, in Maine, in Mississippi, in Oklahoma, Southern California, Arkansas, different places. And but I want you all to be proud that Florida, the Youth Peer Mentoring Program, is the largest and most expansive in the country. And in fact, you all started before the law that now exists brings out peer mentoring as a way of delivering self-advocacy. So y'all led
When did it start?
We began working with Florida VR to develop training and certification when they piloted the program back in 2014. And so that was before the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, where peer mentoring was mentioned in the law as a way of delivering self-advocacy instruction, one of those 5 pre-employment transition services. So that youth peer mentoring program piloted, and then WIOA came into being, and all of a sudden peer mentoring was sort of a accepted way to deliver that self-advocacy. So self-advocacy is a major piece of what the work in VR is about, right? It's getting young people with disabilities, or all people with disabilities, to advocate and determine their own life and employment, independent living, right? So what is really fundamentally changed was this idea that you could use a peer mentor to engage. So I could stand up here for an hour and a half and give you all kinds of really great definitions of what a self-advocate is. But what would that mean? Well, you know the definition. The secret to self-advocacy is not about VR or us telling you what self-advocacy is. It's about you advocating for yourself. And so a peer mentor is a tool that can be used so that relationship is one of engagement, so that the peer mentor engages the peer mentee in beginning to think about their own future and find their voice and move forward in their life, because that's ultimately the centerpiece of self-determination. So I think I mentioned enough about me. I do some stuff with Lights, Camera, Access, and I have some tools and stuff for training and delivery of the service. And then to my left is my colleague, Ed.
Hi, I'm Jesse Riddle with Vocational Rehabilitation. I'm currently one of the transition program administrators, and I spend all my time working with youth and students with disabilities. So we start at the age of 14, give or take, up until that age of 24 with that youth and student with a disability definition. And so I've been with vocational rehab for, or since 2009, so going on about 14 years. And I enjoy what I do, and I spend most of my time, and even when I was a counselor, spending time helping students with disabilities, so they have an earlier start to success. And so I've been around, and I currently work with Steve and one of our other administrators in the youth peer mentoring. So we'll go through the process of how to apply for it, and we'll talk about statistics and really show how the program works with our students.
So this has been my great pleasure to work with Florida VR to sort of pioneer this service. And then the model that we're talking about today in Florida really is the model that was employed in those other states, with some specific differences, but really built on the idea that a young person is paid, and that's a critical component of it. All the peer mentoring programs that I work with use vocational rehab dollars to provide the salary of the peer mentoring. And that's why we're focusing on this idea of a workforce. If you're a young person with a disability and you are successful at your own self-advocacy, are able to complete things like go to college and finish your degree and navigate all of those, and we can provide some additional training, you're a great candidate to sort of speak back and work with and model and mirror self-advocacy in the engagement with a mentee, and hopefully sort of develop a network of sort of leadership where mentors are mentoring and building that community, supporting each other. So as I mentioned, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is a piece of legislation in 2015, and it really did something amazing. And this was kind of a shock when we were starting here in Florida. WIOA hadn't passed, but when it identified these new pre-employment transition services, does everybody understand what a pre-employment have y'all heard that term before? No. Okay, so it is technical, but simply put, pre-employment transition services are a new set of services that are available to students with disabilities who are individuals between the ages of 14 to 21 who are VR clients and have an IPE, or could potentially be a client of VR who have a disability, meaning they might be served under an IPE in the school system.
And so you would need to be a student, to meet the qualifications for a student with a disability, have that disability, that IEP or 504 plan, or if you already have an IEPE, an individualized plan for employment with vocational rehab, that would give you that eligibility. Also, you must be enrolled in some sort of education, so secondary or post-secondary education, to meet that criteria for a student with disability. And so that this can be that 14 actually to 21, so your last date of your 21st birthday, but also with the program, you can go to 24 with youth peer mentoring. But so we'll talk a little bit more about expanding the youth peer mentoring program as well. But there's a lot of students that can participate with this and meet those criteria that could learn more about the program itself and really benefit from it, because it is an amazing program and people just need to know it's there.
Absolutely. There's, I'm just speaking of peer mentoring, in fact, the Family Cafe is a huge mentoring and peer mentoring, or this event is a peer mentoring opportunity, right? You meet people similar to yourself, you share things that you've learned, you go and learn things that you may not know about yet, like peer mentoring, and then you all may go out and tell other people about peer mentoring and what, you know, if you would like to have, if you're a young person, this is a student with a disability and would like to have a peer mentor, then you can go talk to your counselor and say, hey, I think I could benefit from a peer mentor to help me accomplish my goals as I transition, and they can make that referral. So anyway, the pre-apps and the fact that there really was the 15% of the state's VR funds essentially get dedicated to these pre-employment transition services, which means this VR peer mentoring program is built to stay, right? It's a part of a core set of services that VR is offering from here till they make some other modification years down the line or so forth. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? I know it's a little complicated. It doesn't really matter in terms of pre-eds. We just want to give you a little background.
And if we do happen to use the 15% of funds, we take it from the general funds from vocational rehab, so there's no worry about running out of funds for the students, unless of course there's a budget deficit or something, but there's always availability for the pre-eds.
So when we began to talk about developing a peer mentoring program and began to work with Florida VR specifically to create a model, one of the important things is to find out what are the best practices, what is important about peer mentoring. And as we looked at that, we discovered that when we studied peer mentoring programs or mentoring programs, that structure of the program was helpful, that you had training and certification, so that the peer mentor was knowledgeable, that you had goals and objectives in the program, and that things were defined, and yet you still, the peer mentoring is built on a relationship. So within that, there has to be the freedom to develop the relationship and serve the client at where they are, and help them begin the process of peer mentoring and taking on their own responsibility for that. So we did some research and found some programmatic infrastructure and fidelity, which is really a fancy word for sort of the truth in the structure, the way it's done, that makes sense. And that if you did those things, if you had a clear program structure, peer mentoring was effective. And so there were studies that suggested that if you had a good program and it was designed well, that the impact of that service would have an impact on the young person in being more successful at peer mentoring, at their own self-advocacy. So that's what PolicyWorks did. We worked with Florida VR, and we had a chance to work nationally under the new law to help other states model other peer mentoring programs. Some are university focused, some are community focused, but they all really are very similar to the Florida program because it was the first model. So I'll let Jesse, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the referral.
Yes, so currently we have this available for individuals with an individualized plan for employment, and so that means you would have to go through the eligibility process and then develop that plan for services in order to currently receive this. So program will be expanded in the near future. We're currently working on a new database system, and we're going to be updating some of our services. And so one of the good things with the new services that are going to be coming out is that youth peer mentoring is going to be eligible for those that are potentially eligible for vocational rehab services. And so that's those potentially eligible or those pre-ents that students are able to access, and they'll be available for students that are currently 14 to 21 without applying to the traditional program. But that will be coming out later, so we'll have more information on that. But we have the youth peer mentoring. This is a general description of the referral. And so if you're interested in this, you would talk to your vocational rehab counselor and mention that you would like to complete youth peer mentoring. This service is available in person and virtually. So one of the great things since the last few years is that we've moved a lot of our services that are available to multiple areas versus just in your local area. So we have mentors around the state that can provide the service on a virtual platform to make it easier to access the services and maybe match your interests and abilities and qualifications, and just everything about you and your mentor can match better. So we have that as an option now as well. And so with this service too, we usually can do the service for 4 to 6 months at a time. Usually if you're doing the service maybe an hour a week, could be 30 minutes or a couple hours a week, and it's really built to sustain for long periods of time. So you're not doing it all the 1 week and done, but it's a continuance of month after month to really build a relationship and use those resources in the community and to really build on that mentoring. And as we have here, it is one-on-one, so currently it's not offered in a group format, and so it is going to be one-on-one, and you would select your company, one of our vendors, and selecting that mentor. And we're working on some new information as well, so when you access the service, we'll have hopefully have some profiles of the mentors available, so you'll have a profile to read and learn more about the mentor before selecting them. And so that way you can select them based off your interest, and then have that mentor assigned to work with you. And then it is also available for that age range between 14 and 24. So we want to keep it to within the definition of a youth with a disability and that student with a disability. As you'll see, a student with a disability is 14 to 21, and a youth is 16 to 24. And so with this service, we have a couple different goals that we kind of look at in the services in the community. And these are kind of general with what we're covering. Mentoring can cover a lot of aspects, but just for some information, we have the community networks, social networking, and professional networking. So you can work on building those relationships in the community. And so.
In Florida, as we mentioned, we have peer mentoring providers all over the state. We have trained several hundred peer mentors. Do you have a question?
Could I to help a peer because I went to school?
Could you what because you went to school?
Could I to help a peer because I went to school?
If you want to be a mentor or you want to be in the program, you can be a mentor if you're interested in doing that. You would have to sign up with one of our providers to do that service with somebody. You'd have to go through the process and be eligible, but you could find a provider to accept you as a mentor, do the training, and then start doing the services with other mentees.
And providers out there, as we started with the first slide, are looking for young people, young adults who have gone to school and who have progressed to be those peer mentors. And I think that one of the questions on the referral that exists here is, does the mentee have a preference in terms of male or female peer mentor, and some other questions like that. And I know that male peer mentors are actually actively sought because there's not as many around, so those students who are looking for one. So there'd be very, to be highly sought in that. Again, as Jesse mentioned, post-COVID, this service was a one-on-one in-person service prior to COVID, but the state was really very aggressive about making sure that this service was available as soon as possible in the community when it was really needed the most during that time when we were all socially isolated. And you notice that the objective of the peer mentoring program is really about building those support networks in your community, social support networks. How do you network to achieve those career goals that you want? So those professional or employment networks that you can join and be a part of, so that you're interested in opening a business, maybe learning something about your local chamber of commerce or business group or whatever, and the mentor helps you make those connections. So part of that could be as simple as, here, let me tell you about the independent living community center near you, and maybe I can introduce you to the folks down there, or we can go online together and look at their website and find out what kind of programs and things they have, so you can begin to learn about it. The other thing would be to work with you to help you develop your own sort of introduction statement, maybe make a business card, so that when you do go down to the independent living center, you're prepared and feel comfortable to make that connection and build that network. And so, depending on the need of the mentee, the mentor can customize the work and the level of work with the individual to help them be successful at building those networks. And those networks, most of us older folks that have been around a little while have come to understand that learning how to network and connect with people is maybe one of the most important skills you'll ever learn. You'll not only learn it in your professional career, but you'll benefit from it in all of the aspects of your life. So making those connections, asking those questions, learning to introduce yourself, learning to connect with each other. And so that's what the peer mentor works with a mentee. And so in that work, there are all kinds of different things that the mentor and the mentee can do together to help them become more proficient, more confident in advocating for themselves. So we're going to get into just a little bit of programmatic structure detail, but it'll help you sort of understand how it works. So here is sort of the community provider model, and in that, so you have at the top here line that says peer mentoring community-based rehab service providers. So those are the nonprofit organizations that are providing employment services to people with disabilities, students, and youth in the community who have done the peer mentoring training, have become a peer mentoring provider, and therefore they have hired and trained a peer mentor coordinator, and they have hired and trained peer mentors and gotten their background done so that they have available peer mentors. And when they have available peer mentors, then it's like having a store and you've got product, right? So these community providers have product, which are the peer mentors that are available. Like you could be one of those peer mentors, or you could be one of those peer mentors. And then what happens is that your counselor has a client who has an IPE, as you described, who asks for or could benefit from a peer mentor, and that counselor could create a referral, which was that sheet before that we looked at, and put that referral out and see if there are any peer mentors that can match. And once that match is made, the peer mentoring program starts. It's a time-limited service, but after a certain time, you sort of evaluate whether you've accomplished the task of the peer mentoring program. And if there's more work to be needed, then the counselor can add some additional time to that service to benefit the mentee. And so ultimately, when it's all, like I said, when the time limit is up, the peer mentor coordinator provides a report back to the counselor, letting that counselor know what the impact or what the benefit of the peer mentoring has been, so that the counselor can work with the youth or student and identify whether there needs to be maybe some more peer mentoring added. So that's generally the way it works.
Hey, can I just touch on that too?
Yeah.
Just for businesses that may be interested in that, is that you only need one peer mentor coordinator per agency that can oversee as many mentors as they need to. So if you're interested in doing this, you only need the one primary coordinator, and then as many mentors as you see fit for the service.
And that peer mentor really is a mentor themselves, right? So ideally, they're another person who has experience as counselors and employment specialists. They understand what the objective of the VR program and what you're trying to do in terms of employment. And they actually serve in a role as sort of a co-pilot. If you think about the young person, the young adult as a peer mentor, they probably don't know all the answers. They don't have the experience in life. They may be someone a little older and who is working in the profession. So that coordinator is sort of the person that works with their team of mentors to sort of help them, guide them in the activity that they do directly with the client. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right, great. So, we were talking about the distribution. It's sort of like you can see how Jesse was talking about how you need one peer mentor. You could have 3 or 5, and each of those peer mentors could have 3 or 4 or 5 or how many ever clients if they're available to work. And they're sort of the referral identifies how many hours a month of peer mentoring is being asked for. And so it's all about matching that up. And sometimes the peer mentor coordinators have other jobs with their organization, so they may do a little peer mentor coordinating, and they may also may do some employment specialist work as well. And just some numbers. This is mostly over the last few years, it has been focused on just that group of young people who have an IPE, have received peer mentoring to date. But hopefully soon, with the new system, we're going to expand that and make that available to more people.
Yes, it'll make it available to thousands of other students with our agency. So we're hoping to see extreme numbers with that. And so for businesses, we're trying to get them prepared as well, so that they're prepared for the influx of new students that will be interested. So.
Now, are all the peer mentors disabled?
No, they don't. It's not a requirement. It'd be sort of, you can't require someone to do
Right,
a
are
job,
most
right?
of them then?
But my goal, and I don't know the numbers on that, but my goal, because that's sort of personal information in terms of the person. But when I do the training, I talk about the value. It's important that the mentor has an understanding of the barriers. Or, someone asked one time, it was at a college program, and said, should we just get the football team captain to be the peer mentor? And the answer was, well, the football team captain may be great, but does he really understand what it is to have a disability, to have faced those discriminations and barriers and expectations and family issues and all that go into it? Well, okay, so that's fair enough, right? So, there's nothing against a football captain being a peer mentor, but what if that football captain had a sibling, a brother and sister who had a disability? Maybe that football captain would have sort of a sense of that. So you can't just sort of make a rule, but it's always my guidance. I believe that, that. And this really gets into what we're going to talk about now, because we started off talking about workforce, right? About that idea that a young person with a disability, or anyone that meets that, that 18 to 30 age range, can get paid, can work, can add that to their job experience. As they go out and begin their career, this can be their first job. How cool would it to have that on your resume, that you were a peer mentoring for the Florida VRU peer mentoring program, and that you received training and certification, and you worked with clients, and that's really cool, right? So then once you do that, let's say that you're a young person who wants to have a career in social services, and they're just starting, and they get this opportunity to peer mentoring and get trained and certified as part of their career path. Well, when you serve as a peer mentor, you might then someday become a peer mentor coordinator, right? You could serve as a peer mentor for a number of years and then get a job being a peer mentor coordinator. And in order to do that, you have to become an employment specialist. That's one of the requirements to be a peer mentor coordinator. And so you would then go and get the certification to become an employment specialist. In order to get that certification, there are qualifications that you have to have. One of those is a certain amount of time in service, and this time that the peer mentor spent peer mentoring actually goes to that time. So it is part of the development of a person's career to be a peer mentor. And we always focus a lot of our energy and intention in terms of the design of the program in the impact of the young person who's receiving the peer mentee, the peer mentoring, right? We're focused, that's the objective, is to help those young people connect to the resources that will support their success in building independent lives and employment careers, right? But at the same time as we have that, the other sort of added extra is that we get an opportunity to recognize those young people who have done self-advocacy and have begun to build their careers and build their independent lives and pay them and give them credentials around developing their own careers. So that's what I go around the country talking about peer mentoring, and it gets me all excited. Big smile on my face. So what do we do? What is the training and certification? So, you know, you think, okay, well, what we did when we started with Florida is we went around and we looked at all the peer mentoring programs that we could find, and we looked and discovered what they typically have in terms of training. There really is not a lot of training and certification programs in the peer mentoring space, but there were some basic things that we found, some tips and techniques, and some national organization, a little research. Peer mentoring has been used for a longer period of time in the mental health community. And in fact, that was one of the reasons I think that we ended up starting here in Florida, was someone who was part of that community recognized the benefit and thought it would also benefit in terms of employment. So, we developed a training, and we have basically, so some specialization training around disability etiquette, right? The person-centered language and how do you engage someone with a disability. You got tips and techniques for peer mentoring, you know, communication skills, problem solving, and then some introduction to some resources, right? So we built Peer Mentoring Works, PolicyWorks did, in this work that we've done over the last decade. And idea was to build basically a technical assistance center that would have those different training components and also some tools. So that's what's represented here with the icons. Community of practice, that's the peer mentoring program providers meeting together on a regular basis to learn new tips and share the knowledge that we're gaining as we pioneer this program. You've got the Learn Center, which is PolicyWorks' training center. It's an on-demand set of courses that are required to become trained in Florida and become certified. And then we have some field guide and some activity guides. We'll talk a little bit about that, but so I mentioned community of practice. So we're a peer community, youth peer mentoring in Florida, and the peer mentoring program that we're working with nationally is a peer mentoring community. We're learning from each other, right? So we try to get together, and if one group of people have learned something or found something that works, we want to broadcast that, let everybody know. And if we find information, we want to share it. And so we try to get together pretty regularly, and if there are things that are needed, like, oh, you know, peer mentoring would be great if we had this, then maybe we can work and figure out how to get that. And that's what sort of the community of practice is about. And then I mentioned the training that we developed. So here's a list of the certification modules that a peer mentor and a peer mentor take. They really take the same set so that they can have that common language between the coordinator and the mentor. You can see sort of the list of general categories. These are transition essentials, so around employment and disability rights, and employment and disability benefits, and employment and transition services. And these are really complicated, you know, that's a lot of like legal stuff, and really the training is meant to help the peer mentor not be an expert on all of that complicated stuff, but to be exposed to it, to know what the ADA is, and to know what disability disclosure is, and what the legal, you know, that there are rules, to know about benefits, right, and how an impact of benefits to work. Not to be a benefits counselor, but understand that there are people out there who are professionals who can offer that service and help that person know that they should be talking to this person so they can learn to manage their own. And then, of course, because it's a VR program, We do a little campus community MVR program. We want everyone in the peer mentoring program to understand all of the wonderful programs that VR offers under an IPE to their clients. So then, one of the things when we began working, we found that peer mentoring programs, like a lot of programs, had a handbook. So we made a handbook. I think we did a pretty decent job. I had some young people with disabilities helping me sort of source that material. And so they did a lot of research and gathered a lot of information. And we found things like confidentiality agreements. We found some templates and some tools that a peer mentoring program could have. And so we sort of created this big, long, giant 180-page document. And we're so proud of it. We're going to give it all to the peer mentors. And I kept having this nagging feeling in my head that that document was going to be sitting on the computer on somebody's desktop when they were out peer mentoring and they wouldn't have access to that information. And I just kept having that same thought over and over and over again. How do I make sure that the peer mentor has the information they need in the handbook in a way that is accessible on a bus ride or a train ride or, before they met with a person. So you can imagine a mentor and a mentee, if they're gonna meet today at 6 o'clock. Last time when the mentor met with the mentee, it just seemed to have a little bit of communication problem. And the mentor's trying to figure out what to do, and he thinks, oh yeah, there was that training that I got on communication. What was it? There were barriers and there were some tips. What were they? And he's trying to trying to remember those things. Well, this is a way for the peer mentor to have that at their fingertip. So basically, we created an app, a toolkit, that took that handbook and turned it into a field guide. And then we took activities that the mentor and the mentee could do together, and we put those in the field guide. So the things that that the mentor and the mentee can do together on the computer, now that it's on Zoom. Let's say you want to talk about disability disclosure. That's what you want to talk about, is how you talk about your disability when you're meeting people. Let's not even get into the employment piece. Just when you meet people, how do you present yourself? Well, they're great. If you go to YouTube and TED Talks, you can actually type in disability disclosure and get some really great stuff, some really fascinating people and a unique perspective. So what if the mentor and the mentee were to do that, were to get on a Zoom platform and type in and look at some of those videos and then have a conversation about it and have that sort of engagement, think about what was presented, and then come up with a plan for their own disability disclosure, sort of a strategy that they could develop as an impact to that activity. And so the field guide is really a resource that's intended to help the mentor, like a toolkit, like when a plumber comes and does plumbing at your house, he brings this little toolbox, and when he needs a pair of pliers or whatever, he's got it there, and tools in his truck. Well, that's what sort of the peer mentoring field guide is. And so it is an app, and it has a Florida peer mentoring edition, so there's a special section in the Florida where there are resources that just are available to the program in Florida, and I have one for Mississippi and other states as well. So it sort of is an expanded directory. Some of the things I mentioned, it had, this is the guidepost for success, so that's around disability employment policy. It's a federal resource that is about how to get a job and work and all the resources and stuff you need. So that information is in there, and sort of it becomes, it has activity guides, and so that is a support for the direct provision of the service. If the mentor and the mentee has a prop, essentially, they could work on together. And I'm going to show you one of them. So the features of these activity guides is that they have program resources for the direct support for peer mentoring activities. They align to the peer mentoring goals, and they are accessible on the phone and on a PC, so like in a Zoom platform. And so this is one that was written for peer mentoring work. A colleague of mine who is co-chair of the National Disability Mentoring Coalition, which is a national disability mentoring organization founded by, in honor of Susan Daniels, who created the Ticket to Work program and also developed PolicyWorks. But this Derek is a colleague of mine, and basically he talks about, he's about my age, so like the mid-50s, right? So 30 years ago, he got out of college with a really nice degree, smart young man, a little bit of a bad economy, and he was having some trouble finding a job. And everybody kept giving him the same piece of advice. Oh, you just need to know how to network. And he thought to himself, okay, cool. So how come nobody's ever taught me how to network? And think about it, have you ever been in a class or gone where you've learned how to network, how to connect to people, how to engage people, and how to build those connections with the people that you haven't met yet, that will help you get that next job. So he began to think about that, right? So over the last 30 years of career, he began to ask people about networking. And he asked national advocates in the disability community, and he asked leaders and all kinds of different people about networking, and put together a 4-phase strategic networking plan. And so it's an activity guide. It has activities that you can do yourself or with someone to help identify what the 4-phase model. And so it's a 28-page document, and it's got all kinds of good tips in it from really cool people, and it's inside the field guide. It's one of the tools that are available through the peer mentoring program. And it talks about preparing to network, building confidence, meeting people, and following up. And probably one of the most important ones is following up. When you meet someone, send a note back and say how you enjoyed meeting them. Makes a big difference. So all kinds of tips like that. So there's my friend Derek. And as I mentioned, Disability Mentoring Coalition. He has some quotes in there. Here's one from Martin Luther King: if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you keep moving forward. And so it's got a lot of great, it talks about his mentoring. Madra, what are we doing in time?
It's 5:14.
All right, so I can slow down a little bit. So let's see if we can get this to work. Well, I will give you a website at the end that you can write down, and if you don't have anything to write down, I'll write it down for you afterwards. You can go to that website. You can download the field guide. It's an app that you can get from the Google Store or the Apple Play Store. So you basically go get the field guide, download it, create an account, and then it has this activity guide in it, and it's available actually at Peer Mentoring Works, and it really is, the breakdown of that tool. So the Tech Center is sort of all of those activities, and we hope to continue to build activities that peer mentoring and thinking can do together, and that's why we do those community practices, so that we can find out from the community what it would be a good tool to add to the tools. And this is a very small effort in the big world of VR and peer mentoring and employment, but it's interesting because really, even when you go back to the mental health community, this kind of structural approach to developing a training and certification standard has never been done before. And so these tools that have been developed, although they're not perfect, and there's so much more that can be there, I'm really proud of the work that we've done before to really model this and make it available to the country. Hopefully it will have a great impact. I'm a big believer in peer mentoring. So I mentioned that we have some websites here. First of all, my name is Steve Allen. You can always email me if you want to have a conversation. I'm always down for talking about peer mentoring day or night. Just let me know. And then peermentoringworks.org, and that's where you'll find information. But those are where those tools are, like the field guide and the activity guides, like the peer mentoring, the networking guide. This guy right here, Jesse.
Yes, and so my contact is my first and last name, so it's jesse.riddle@vr.fldoe.org, and you can find our website at www.rehabworks.org, and all the information about our program and services is on the website. And of course, if you need to apply for services, there's information on there to find your local office and get started with
now the fun part. I'm gonna ask you questions if you got peer mentors, mentors. Who wants to share the story of someone who has been a mentor in your life? It could be a teacher, it can be, sort of a trip, like a program peer mentor, or just someone that, like an uncle or someone in the family. Anybody have a story to share? No? How about, got any peer mentors? Except for Jesse, you can't mention Jesse.
I guess I can share, Steve. So what came to my mind as you were asking about a mentor in our lives, actually I was thinking of our previous supported employment administrator that worked with our, so one of my coworkers, Steve knows who
Yeah.
she is, and she just taught me so much, not only about my job, but just her kind of demeanor and philosophy about working with individuals with disabilities. Just really inspired me, and not only was it the information that she imparted to me, but just the spirit of believing in the people that we work with, and
So you, as a result of that, have also mentored people at work or in other places in your life? I mean, the value of not only being mentored or mentoring is really important. And if you want to be successful, one of the biggest pieces of advice I humbly offer is find a peer mentor, and then find an opportunity to peer mentor someone who could benefit from your experience. The two are incredibly valuable to your development. We have when we learn what we teach or share, right? And so one of the values of peer mentoring as a workforce is that you're getting paid to do something for yourself, so that you could model it to someone who could benefit from it. And so it benefits both equally, and maybe in fact benefits the peer mentor more so. And what we want to do is create a community where peer mentoring is a core relationship and not one that is only for those that have had the benefit of being part of a peer mentoring program. So, yes.
I had a question.
Yes.
I was just wondering if this has been expanded to other populations. I could see this really working in two different populations, foster care and juvenile justice.
And both of those have had, there are peer mentoring programs, but they don't really have this structure. I think one of the benefits of doing this in VR and doing this nationally, like we got the opportunity to do, was that we really got a chance to build this out, where a lot of these programs, and some of them are fantastic, and usually they're driven by individuals with passion around building up a mentoring program because they've been impacted themselves. But there really isn't sort of the structural component around it. Part of it is funding. One of the advantages in terms of the VR was the fact that there are those VR dollars committed to this as a service for individuals who could benefit from it. And so now that it's here, I am constantly looking for opportunities to expand the offering that we have to specific goals and objectives. For instance, if you are part of an apprenticeship or an internship, how could a peer mentor benefit you? If you're part of a particular community, like the autism community, how can individuals on the spectrum mentor other individuals on the spectrum, and what is the impact of that? So as you begin to think about all the different applications, I think it's like a Swiss Army knife. I don't know what a Swiss Army
Well, the
knife
reason
is.
I'm mentioning those are, like VR, these are state agencies
Yes.
that fund these. That's
And,
all.
we currently work with DJJ in a capacity to provide, VR services for those in DJJ. So we're working on expanding the services so they can receive it in some of the facilities.
Yeah.
And of course, it's available to them after they're released.
Yeah.
But currently it's not available to them, but we're trying to work on
Yeah, I
that,
could
so
just
it's
see them listening a lot more to
definitely.
someone like that than
And a lot of it
Wonderful.
comes back to the background checks, being able to enter the
Sure.
facility, so there's some complications that way, but, we have tried to do it, and
Okay.
we're working on it, but it is, you
No,
know,
it's a
there's
hard
there's a
population.
process to it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do advocate for those in the DJJ, and some of the facilities that we work with. But we offer some of the pre-employment services, self-advocacy and the work readiness training for those in DJJ.
And there are in the peer mentoring program in Florida, some providers, community rehab providers who do work specifically with that community. And so there are individuals in that community that have disabilities and they certainly could be a part of this program if they meet the age group. But that 14, 21 youth student piece, the truth is that having done this, there are opportunities to talk about adult peer mentoring now, peer mentoring focused on IDED communities, specifically peer mentoring in colleges and universities when young people go to school. I'm gonna get to you in just a second, Chase. Thanks for your patience. In the university, like the Disability Service Center, so that when somebody comes that first year after being out of high school or in college, how do we help make sure that they understand how to get those accommodations? It's a whole new world when a person enters post-secondary education, and how much can we increase the success of individuals by having that peer mentor engage at the right time to impact that. Chase.
I want to talk about the program after the talk because I want to start a family with disability ministry in the United Methodist Church.
Okay, great. I will make sure you have a card, and maybe we can get together too sometime later too as well. I'd be glad to talk to you. Awesome. Anyone else have a question? Are we on the time?
About 5 minutes. So.
Okay, all right. Well, you get 5 minutes early to make it to your next event. Thank you so much for being here. I hope it was helpful. If you know someone who is interested in being a peer mentor, starting a program, being a mentee, please reach out to your counselors and get the information. So Chase, let's
I got his information.